In the autumn of 1889, the entire county of Derbyshire was brought to a standstill by a scandal that no one saw coming. It wasn't a murder, and it wasn't a theft. It was an empty altar. Lady Eleanora Vance, the most beautiful debutante of the season, vanished 20 minutes before her wedding to the wealthiest duke in England. Gossip columns called her ungrateful. Her family called her insane. But they didn't know that while the wedding bells were ringing, Eleanora was knee-deep in mud, saving the life of a stranger who would change history. What happened next wasn't just a romance, it was a revolution. This is the story of the bride who ran away, only to run straight into the arms of destiny. October 14th, 1889, Blackwood Manor, Derbyshire. The air inside the dressing room tasted of stale lavender and rising panic. Eleanora Vance stared at her reflection in the grand, gilded mirror, but she didn't recognize the woman looking back. The corset was laced so tight that each breath felt like a stolen luxury. The silk of her wedding dress, imported from Paris and costing more than a farmhand made in a decade, felt heavy, like a shroud rather than a celebration. "Stop fidgeting, Eleanora," her mother, Lady Charlotte, snapped, adjusting the veil with trembling hands. "Lord Thorne will be here within the hour. Do not ruin this. You know what is at stake." Eleanora knew. She knew it in the way the plaster was peeling off the ceiling in the east wing of their ancestral home. She knew it in the hushed, terrified whispers of the servants who hadn't been paid in 3 months. Her father, the once proud Baron Vance, had gambled away their fortune on bad railway investments in the colonies. They were destitute, maintaining a facade of wealth that was crumbling by the day. And Lord Reginald Thorne was the solution. Reginald was 45 years old to Eleanora's 19. He was a man of immense wealth, possessing a shipping empire that spanned the Atlantic, but he possessed a soul as cold as the ocean his ships traversed. He was known in London society not for his charity, but for his temper. Just the day before, during the rehearsal dinner, Eleanora had watched him strike a stable boy across the face with his riding crop, simply for bringing the wrong horse. "He is a monster, Mother," Eleanora whispered, her eyes welling up. "He is a savior," Lady Charlotte hissed, grabbing Eleanora's shoulders. "He pays the debts. He saves this house. He saves us. Love is a luxury for the poor, Eleanora. We cannot afford it." The church bells of St. Jude's began to toll in the distance, a deep, mournful sound that signaled the beginning of the end of her life. "I need air," Eleanora gasped. The walls were closing in. "Just 5 minutes, please. I cannot breathe in here." "Eleanora, the carriage is—" "5 minutes!" Eleanora shouted, a rare burst of defiance that shocked her mother into silence. "I will be in the garden. I just need to breathe before I sign my life away." Before Lady Charlotte could protest further, Eleanora grabbed the heavy skirts of her gown and fled the room. She didn't stop at the garden. She couldn't. The perfectly manicured hedges of Blackwood Manor felt like prison bars. She ran past the iron gates, down the muddy path that led toward the old woods bordering on the estate. It had rained heavily the night before. The ground was a treacherous slurry of mud and decaying leaves. Her white satin shoes were ruined within seconds. The hem of her gown, worth thousands of pounds, dragged through the muck, turning brown and heavy. She didn't care. She just wanted to run. She reached the edge of the old Roman road, a seldom used path that cut through the forest. It was silent here, save for the wind rustling the dying leaves. She leaned against an ancient oak tree, gasping for air, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. "I can't do it," she thought. "I can't marry him." But if she didn't, her family would be on the streets. Her father would likely be thrown in debtor's prison. She wiped her eyes, steeling herself to turn back to her execution. But just as she pushed off the tree, a sound cut through the wind. It was a groan, low, pained, and human. Eleonora froze. She looked down the road. About 50 yards away, a small carriage, more of a disguised cart, had skidded off the road and overturned into a deep, water-filled ditch. The horse had broken free and vanished, leaving the vehicle on its side, one wheel spinning lazily in the air. "Help!" a voice croaked. Eleonora looked back toward the manor. The bells were ringing louder now. If she didn't leave this second, she would be late. If she was late, Reginald would be furious. He might call off the wedding. He might call in the debts immediately. She looked at the overturned cart. She looked at the manor. "Damn the dress," she whispered. Eleonora Vance picked up her skirts and ran. Not away from her problems, but toward the disaster in the ditch. The ditch was steeper than it looked. Eleonora slid down the embankment, the mud coating her legs, ruining the layers of petticoats. The water at the bottom was freezing, biting into her skin. Trapped beneath the splintered wood of the cart was an elderly woman. She was dressed in dark, heavy traveling clothes, but her face was pale and streaked with blood from a gash on her forehead. Her leg was pinned beneath the heavy axle of the cart. "Hold on!" Eleonora cried out, wading through the knee-deep sludge. "I'm here!" The old woman opened her eyes. They were a piercing, icy blue, sharp and intelligent despite the pain. She looked at Eleonora, taking in the ruined wedding dress, the veil snagged on a branch, the diamonds sparkling incongruously in the filth. "You," the woman wheezed, "you're a bride." "Not yet," Eleonora grunted, shoving her shoulder against the heavy wood of the cart. "And perhaps not ever, if I don't get you out." "Push with me." Eleonora strained. She was not a strong woman by nature. She had been raised to pour tea and play the pianoforte. But adrenaline is a powerful fuel. She dug her feet into the mud, ignoring the tearing sound of her bodice, and heaved with everything she had. The cart groaned and lifted just an inch. "Pull your leg out! Now!" Eleonora screamed. The woman grit her teeth and dragged her leg free with a cry of agony. Eleonora let the cart slam back down, splashing water and mud over both of them. Eleonora immediately fell to her knees, ripping the silk sash from her waist. "You're bleeding badly." She didn't hesitate to tear the expensive French lace of her petticoat to create a makeshift bandage. She bound the woman's head wound and then checked the leg. It was broken, badly twisted at the ankle. "You are ruining your gown, child," the woman whispered, her voice trembling with shock. "Do you know what day it is?" "It's my wedding day," Eleonora said, wiping mud from the woman's cheek with a surprisingly gentle touch. "I'm supposed to be at St. Jude's right now." "Then go," the woman commanded, though she gripped Eleonora's hand tightly. "Leave me. Someone will come." "No one comes down this road," Eleonora said firmly, "and I am not leaving you to freeze in a ditch. Reginald can wait. Humanity cannot." The woman studied Eleonora's face for a long moment, a strange expression crossing her features. It wasn't just gratitude, it was assessment. "Reginald? Lord Thorne?" "Unfortunately," Eleonora muttered. She tried to lift the woman, but she was dead weight. "I need to get you up the bank to the road. Can you stand if I support you?" "I fear I cannot," the woman admitted. Eleonora looked around desperately. The wind was picking up, and the temperature was dropping. Then the rhythmic thudding of hooves echoed against the wet earth. "Help!" Eleonora screamed, waving her muddy arms. "Help us!" A massive black stallion burst around the bend. The rider, a man in a long, dark riding coat, pulled the reins hard, the horse rearing slightly before coming to a halt. He was handsome, with dark hair swept back from a strong, angular face, but his expression was one of thunderous worry. He leaped from the horse with a grace that spoke of military training. "Grandmother!" he shouted, sliding down the embankment without a second thought for his polished boots. "I am alive, Jacob," the old woman snapped, though her voice was weak. "Stop shouting. You'll frighten the girl." The man, Jacob, turned his eyes to Eleonora. For a second, he stopped dead. He saw a girl covered in muck, wearing a wedding dress that was destroyed beyond repair, shivering in a ditch while holding his grandmother's head above the water. "You," Jacob started, his voice deep and resonant. "You saved her." "She was pinned," Eleonora said, her teeth chattering. "We need to get her to a doctor. Her leg is broken." Jacob didn't waste time with questions. He scooped the elderly woman up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. He carried her up the bank, Eleonora scrambling up behind them, slipping in the mud. Once on the road, he settled the woman gently onto his horse, wrapping his own heavy coat around her. Only then did he turn back to Eleonora. He looked at her properly this time. He took in the ruined lace, the diamond necklace, the fear in her eyes. "You are Lady Eleonora Vance," he said. It wasn't a question. "I saw the notices. You are to marry Lord Thorn today." "I was," Eleonora corrected, looking down at her dress. I think I am very late." Jacob pulled a gold pocket watch from his vest. The ceremony was to begin 30 minutes ago. Eleonora felt the blood drain from her face. 30 minutes. Reginald would be apoplectic. The scandal would be absolute. "I have to go," she whispered, panic returning. "You cannot walk back like this," Jacob said, stepping closer. He took off his scarf, fine cashmere, and draped it around her shivering shoulders. "My estate is 3 miles east. I will take my grandmother there, but I cannot leave you." "I must go to the church," Eleonora insisted. "My family, my father." "If you go to the church like this, Thorn will humiliate you," Jacob warned. His eyes darkened at the mention of the name. He is not a man who forgives embarrassment. "I have no choice," Eleonora cried out. "Please, sir, if you are a gentleman, help me get to St. Jude's." Jacob looked at his suffering grandmother, then at the desperate bride. He made a decision. "Get on the horse, behind my grandmother. I will lead you there." "But the doctor—" "The church is on the way to the physician's house in the village," Jacob lied smoothly. "We go together." Eleonora climbed onto the horse, sitting behind the injured woman, holding her steady. Jacob took the reins and began to run alongside the horse, his long strides eating up the distance. As they moved, the old woman turned her head slightly back toward Eleonora. "You gave up a fortune to help an old crone in a ditch," she murmured. "Why?" "Because," Eleonora said, her voice soft but firm. "A fortune is useless if you cannot live with the person you see in the mirror." The old woman smiled then. It was a terrifying, secretive smile. "I shall remember that, Eleonora Vance. I shall remember that very well." St. Jude's Cathedral. Toward past the hour. The atmosphere inside the church was toxic. 300 of England's most elite aristocrats sat in the pews, muttering behind their fans. At the altar, Lord Reginald Thorn paced like a caged tiger. His face was a mottled purple of rage. In the front row, Lady Charlotte was weeping into a handkerchief, while Baron Vance looked as though he might have a heart attack. "She has run!" Reginald spat, turning to the congregation. "The little harlot has run off!" "Reginald, please!" Baron Vance begged, standing up. "There must be an explanation." "The explanation is that your daughter is a coward and a thief!" Reginald roared, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "She has stolen my time, my reputation, and the jewels I gave her. I will have the constables hunt her down, and you, Vance. I will have your estate seized by sunset." The heavy oak doors of the church slammed open. Silence fell instantly. A collective gasp ripped through the room. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the grey, rainy light, was Eleonora. She was a vision of catastrophe. Her dress was brown with filth up to the waist. Her hair had collapsed from its pins and hung in wet, muddy hanks around her face. She was missing a shoe. She looked like she had crawled out of a swamp. "I am here," Eleonora announced, her voice trembling but audible. "I am here, Reginald." Reginald stared at her, his eyes bulging. He marched down the aisle, stopping just feet from her. The smell of the swamp water on her was potent. "Look at you," he sneered, his voice dripping with disgust. "You filthy creature! Where have you been? Rolling in the hay with a stable boy?" "I was helping an injured woman," Eleonora said, lifting her chin. "There was an accident on the old Roman road." "An accident?" Reginald laughed, a cruel barking sound. He turned to the crowd. "She expects us to believe this? She soils herself on her wedding day and claims it was an act of charity." He grabbed her arm roughly, his fingers digging into her bruised flesh. "You are a disgrace. Do you think I will marry this?" He gestured to her ruined form. "I bought a pristine flower, not a weed pulled from the muck." "Let go of me," Eleonora said, wincing. "I will let go of you when I throw you into the street," Reginald shouted. He raised his hand, and for a terrifying second, it looked as though he would strike her right there in the house of God. "I would suggest," a deep, calm voice cut through the tension like a saber, "that you unhand the lady. Immediately." The crowd turned. Stepping out from the shadows of the vestibule was the man from the road, Jacob. He was still muddy, his boots ruined, but he strode into the church with an authority that made the air change. Pressure. He walked straight up to Reginald. Reginald sneered at the newcomer. "And who is this? Your lover? You bring your filth right into my wedding?" "I am the man who escorted Lady Eleonora here," Jacob said calmly, "after she saved the life of my grandmother." "And who are you?" Reginald demanded. "Some wandering peasant? A groom?" Jacob smiled. It was a dangerous smile. He reached into his coat and pulled out a signet ring, slipping it onto his finger. He held it up, the gold catching the candlelight. "I am Jacob Arthur Pendleton," he said softly, "Duke of Ashford. And, as of last week, the Crown Prince of Livonia." The silence in the church was absolute. It was deafening. Reginald's face went pale. The Duchy of Ashford was powerful, but the Crown Prince of Livonia was royalty. It was a small but incredibly wealthy kingdom in Central Europe, and Jacob's mother had been the English king's cousin. "Your Highness," Reginald stammered, his grip on Eleonora loosening instantly. "You just attempted to strike a woman who performed an act of heroism," Jacob said, his voice hard as iron. "A woman who saved the Dowager Duchess of Ashford. My grandmother is outside in my carriage, receiving care from my physician. She will be very interested to hear how her saviour was treated." Jacob turned to Eleonora. He ignored the mud. He ignored the smell. He took her trembling hand and bowed low, pressing a kiss to her dirty knuckles. "Lady Eleonora," Jacob said, loud enough for the back row to hear. "My debt to you can never be repaid. But I intend to try." He stood up and looked at her parents, then at the stunned congregation. "This wedding," Jacob declared, "is over. October 14th, 1889. Late afternoon." The silence that followed Prince Jacob's declaration was shattered by the sound of Baron Vance collapsing into his pew. His face was grey, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he clutched his chest. "Father!" Eleonora cried out, pulling away from Jacob to rush to her father's side. Reginald Thorne did not look concerned for the man's health. He looked at the scene with a cold, calculating sneer. He smoothed the lapels of his morning suit, his composure returning now that the initial shock of the prince's title had worn off. He was a businessman, after all, and he knew that even princes had to obey the laws of the bank. "A touching performance," Reginald said, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. He stepped closer to the pew where Eleonora was fanning her father. "But let us speak of reality, shall we? The wedding is off. Very well. But the contract remains." Jacob stepped between Reginald and the trembling family. "What contract?" Reginald pulled a folded document from his breast pocket. "Baron Vance borrowed £50,000 from my private accounts to cover his railway folly. The condition of the loan was simple: repayment in full upon the marriage of his daughter to me. Without the marriage, the loan is called immediately. In cash." He looked down at Eleonora, his eyes devoid of mercy. "You have until noon tomorrow, Eleonora, or I seize Blackwood Manor, every stick of furniture inside it, and I send your father to Marshalsea debtor's prison. Heroes belong in stories. In the real world, they pay their debts." With a sharp turn, Reginald marched out of the church, his entourage scrambling to follow. Eleonora felt the world spinning. £50,000. It was a fortune. It was more money than she could imagine. "We are ruined," Lady Charlotte wailed, burying her face in her hands. "We are on the streets." Eleonora stood up. The mud on her dress had dried into a stiff, uncomfortable crust. She felt small, dirty, and utterly defeated. She had saved a life, yes, but she had destroyed her family in the process. "I will fix this," Eleonora whispered, though she had no idea how. "I will work. I will sell everything." "You will do no such thing," Jacob said. He was standing by the altar rail, watching her. The anger that had been directed at Reginald was gone, replaced by a calm, authoritative resolve. "My grandmother, Duchess Beatrix, is a woman of formidable will," Jacob said. "She does not accept charity without repayment. You saved her life, Lady Eleonora. The House of Pendleton does not leave its debts unpaid." "Your Highness," Eleonora said, trying to curate a curtsy despite her state, "you cannot pay £50,000. That is madness." "It is a Tuesday," Jacob replied with a faint, dry smile. "And I am not paying it. I am buying the debt." He turned to his personal secretary, a thin man who had appeared silently at his elbow. "Find Thorne. Tell him the debt is transferred to the Crown Estate of Livonia. If he wishes to collect, he can sue a sovereign nation. Tell him also that if he speaks one word of slander against Lady Eleonora, I will have his trade routes in the Baltic Sea blockaded by the Livonian navy." The secretary nodded and vanished. Jacob turned back to Eleonora. "Pack your things. Blackwood Manor is no longer safe for you. Thorne is a petty man. He will send bailiffs and reporters to your door by nightfall to humiliate you. You and your parents will stay at Ashford Hall until this storm passes." "I cannot accept this," Eleonora protested, her pride flaring up even through her exhaustion. "I am not a charity case. I am not a beggar." Jacob stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of rain, horse leather, and expensive tobacco. He looked down at her, his dark eyes searching hers. "You are not a beggar," he said softly. "You are the only person in this county who had the courage to do what was right when everyone else was doing what was easy. That makes you an equal. Now please, get in the carriage." October 16th, 1889, Ashford Hall. Eleonora woke to the sound of silk rustling. She opened her eyes to find herself in a room larger than the entire ground floor of her father's house. The ceiling was painted with cherubs, the curtains were heavy velvet, and standing at the foot of the bed was a maid holding a silver tray with tea and the morning papers. "Good morning, my lady," the maid said, bobbing a curtsy. "His Highness requests your presence in the solarium for breakfast. But perhaps you should not read the papers." Eleonora sat up, her body aching from the exertion of the previous day. "Give it to me." The maid hesitated, then handed over a copy of the London Gazette. The headline was printed in bold black ink. "The Muddy Bride. Debutante flees altar for mystery lover in ditch." Eleonora felt the bile rise in her throat. The article was vicious. It claimed she was mentally unstable. It claimed she had been seen wrestling in the mud with a vagrant. It barely mentioned the injured woman. Reginald Thorne had clearly been busy feeding lies to the press. She threw the paper aside and got out of bed. "I need a dress." "The prince has provided a wardrobe, my lady," the maid said, opening a massive oak wardrobe. Inside hung rows of exquisite gowns, silks, satins, wools, all in the latest Parisian fashions. "They belonged to his sister," the maid explained quietly. "She passed away some years ago. He thought they might fit." Eleonora chose a simple, high-necked dress of dark blue wool. It was austere, almost armor-like. She brushed her hair until it shone, pinched her pale cheeks to bring back some color, and marched downstairs. She would not hide. She found the solarium bathed in winter sunlight. It was a glass-walled room filled with exotic ferns and orchids. At a round iron table sat Jacob, reading a ledger, and, to Eleonora's shock, the old woman from the ditch. Duchess Beatrix looked vastly different from the woman in the mud. Her white hair was coiffed into a severe, regal style. Her broken leg was propped up on a velvet stool, encased in a plaster cast. She held a cane with a silver lion's head handle, which she tapped rhythmically against the floor. "So," Beatrix said, her voice sharp as a razor, "the runaway awakens." Eleonora stopped and curtsied deeply. "Your Grace, I am relieved to see you well." "Well?" Beatrix scoffed. "I have a broken leg, and I am stuck in England in November. I am miserable. But I am alive, thanks to you." Jacob looked up, his eyes softening when they landed on Eleonora. He stood immediately, a mark of respect that made Eleonora's heart stutter. "Lady Eleonora, please sit. Ignore my grandmother. She bites, but she has no teeth." "I have plenty of teeth, you insolent boy," Beatrix snapped, though there was affection in it. She turned her icy gaze to Eleonora. "I read the papers. Thorne is trying to destroy you." "He is succeeding," Eleonora said, sitting down and taking the cup of tea Jacob poured for her. "I am a laughingstock. My reputation is in tatters. No decent man will ever speak to me again." "Good," Beatrix said, buttering a piece of toast. "Decent men are boring, and a reputation is like a china plate. Sometimes you have to break it to see what it's actually made of." Beatrix leaned forward. "You have spirit, girl. You have grit. Most women of your station would have fainted at the sight of blood. You tore up a 1,000-pound dress to bind a wound. That is not just kindness. That is leadership." "It was instinct," Eleonora murmured. "It was potential," Beatrix corrected. "Jacob tells me he has bought your father's debt, which means you are technically under our protection. But I do not like idle guests. If you stay here, you will be useful." "I want to be useful," Eleonora said firmly. "I do not want charity." "Excellent." Beatrix pointed her cane at a stack of correspondence on the table. "Jacob is a prince, but he is a terrible administrator. He is currently trying to negotiate a trade treaty between Livonia and Britain regarding wool exports. He is failing because he is too honest. You, however, know how to manage a household on a budget of nothing. You know how to lie to keep up appearances. You will help him with the correspondence." Jacob groaned. "Grandmother, she is a guest, not a secretary." "She is a partner," Beatrix said, her eyes gleaming. "Unless you prefer she sits in her room crying over Reginald Thorne?" Eleanora looked at Jacob. He looked tired. The weight of his new title sat heavy on his broad shoulders. He wasn't just a rich man. He was a man responsible for a country he barely knew. "I would like to help," Eleanora said softly. For the next 2 weeks, life at Ashford Hall fell into a strange, domestic rhythm. Eleanora worked in the library with Jacob. She organized his letters. She drafted responses to diplomats, and she helped him navigate the treacherous waters of British high society, which she knew far better than he did. They worked late into the nights, the fire crackling in the hearth. They argued over phrasing. They laughed over the absurdity of court etiquette, and slowly the walls between them began to lower. One rainy evening, as they were sealing a letter to the Prime Minister, Jacob stopped. He watched the firelight dance on Eleanora's face. "You should have been a queen," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Eleanora froze, her hand hovering over the wax seal. "Do not mock me, Jacob." "I am not," he said. He stood and walked around the desk. He stopped inches from her. The air in the room grew thick and electric. "You have a mind for strategy that rivals my general's. You have a heart that puts saints to shame. Thorne was a fool. He didn't know what he had." Eleanora looked up at him. His eyes were dark, intense, and filled with a longing that mirrored her own. She had fallen for him, not because he was a prince, but because he was the man who had run alongside a horse to save her dignity. "Jacob," she whispered. He reached out, his hand grazing her cheek. He leaned in. The library doors swung open. A footman stood there, looking pale. "Your Highness, a visitor." Jacob pulled back, frustrated. "I gave orders not to be disturbed." "It is not a local visitor, sir," the footman stammered. "It is Her Serene Highness." Jacob's face went white, all the warmth drained from his eyes. A woman swept into the room. She was tall, blonde, and devastatingly beautiful. She wore a traveling cloak of white fur and diamonds at her throat. She looked at Jacob with a possessive, predatory smile. "Jacob, darling," she purred, walking past the footman. "You are hard to find. Livonia is falling apart without you, and here you are, playing house in the English countryside." She turned her gaze to Eleanora. Her eyes were green and cold. "And who is this?" "The secretary?" Jacob straightened up, his posture becoming rigid and formal. "Eleanora, this is Princess Sophia of Prussia." He paused, looking like a man about to step onto the gallows. "She is my fiancée." November 1st, 1889. The word hung in the air like smoke from a pistol shot. Fiancé. Eleanora felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her cold and numb. She stepped back, her hand gripping the edge of the mahogany desk for support. Of course he was engaged. He was a crown prince. Princes did not marry disgraced daughters of bankrupt barons. They married princesses. "A pleasure," Eleanora managed to choke out, her training taking over where her heart had failed. She dropped a curtsy so low it was almost a collapse. I will leave you to your reunion." "Eleanora, wait," Jacob said, taking a step toward her. "Let her go, Jacob," Princess Sophia said, stripping off her white leather gloves. She tossed them onto the desk, right on top of the letters Eleanora had spent hours drafting. "We have matters of state to discuss. The Kaiser is asking why you haven't returned to the capital." Eleanora didn't look back. She fled the library, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor of the hallway. She didn't stop until she reached the sanctuary of the solarium. Duchess Beatrix was there, staring out at the rain-lashed gardens. She didn't turn around when Eleonora entered. "So," Beatrix said, her voice devoid of its usual mockery, "the Prussian vulture has landed." "You knew," Eleonora accused, her voice trembling. "You knew he was engaged." Beatrix turned her wheelchair, she had graduated from the bed, to face Eleonora. "It is a political arrangement, child. It was made when Jacob was 5 years old. It means nothing to his heart." "It means everything to his life," Eleonora cried. "He is to be a king. She is a princess. I am nobody. I am the muddy bride. I am a scandal." "You are only a scandal if you accept the label," Beatrix snapped. "Sophia is dangerous. She is vain, power-hungry, and she spies for her uncle, the German Kaiser. If Jacob marries her, Livonia will become nothing more than a puppet state for Germany. Jacob knows this. He hates the match." "Then why doesn't he break it?" "Because Livonia is small and poor," Beatrix said grimly. "Prussia provides our military protection. Breaking the engagement risks war. Unless—" Beatrix looked at Eleonora, her eyes narrowing in calculation. "Unless what?" "Unless Jacob finds a better alliance," Beatrix said, "or unless he finds a reason to fight that is worth more than safety." The door to the solarium opened, and Jacob entered. He looked frantic. "Eleonora, please, let me explain." "There is nothing to explain," Eleonora said, turning her back to him. "You are betrothed. I am a guest. I have overstepped my bounds." "The engagement is a shackle," Jacob said, his voice raw. "I have tried to break it for 3 years. Sophia refuses to let go. She wants the title of queen." "And she will have it," Eleonora said. "I must leave, Jacob. I cannot stay here under the same roof as your future wife. It is improper, and it is painful." "I will not let you leave," Jacob said fiercely. "If you leave, Thorn will destroy you. I can protect you here." "And who protects me from you?" Eleonora whispered, finally turning to face him. Tears streamed down her face. "Who protects me from falling in love with a man I can never have." Jacob went silent. The truth was out. Before he could answer, a loud commotion erupted in the main hall. The heavy front doors were being pounded upon. "Open up! By order of the High Court!" Jacob frowned and moved to the hallway, Eleonora and Beatrix following. Reginald Thorn stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 constables and a man in a judicial wig. He was soaking wet, but his face was triumphant. "What is the meaning of this?" Jacob demanded. "This is private property." "And we are here for a criminal," Reginald sneered. He pointed a gloved finger at Eleonora. "I have a warrant for the arrest of Lady Eleonora Vance," the judge announced, holding up a paper. "On what grounds?" Jacob roared, stepping in front of Eleonora. "Theft," Reginald said, his smile widening. "Lady Eleonora ran away with a diamond necklace worth £10,000. My family heirloom. She never returned it. That is grand larceny." Eleonora's hand flew to her throat. She wasn't wearing it now, but she had been wearing it when she fled the church. She had taken it off that first night at Ashford Hall and placed it in the drawer of her vanity. She had forgotten all about it in the chaos. "It is in my room," Eleonora said, panic rising. "I intended to return it. I forgot." "Likely story," Reginald laughed. "Constable sees her. You will not touch her." Jacob drew himself up to his full height. "I am a prince of the blood. You have no authority here." "Actually," Princess Sophia's voice drifted down from the top of the stairs. She was leaning over the banister, watching the scene with amusement. "They do, darling. You are on English soil. English law applies. And harbouring a criminal? Well, that would look very bad for Livonia's diplomatic relations, wouldn't it? Jacob looked up at Sophia, betrayal written on his face. She had likely tipped Reginald off. "Eleonora," Jacob said, turning to her, "I will fix this. I promise." "Don't fight them, Jacob," Eleonora said, seeing the trap. If he fought the police, he would cause an international incident. He would lose his crown. "I will go." The constable stepped forward and placed irons on Eleonora's wrists. The cold metal bit into her skin. "Take her to the lock-up," Reginald ordered, stepping close to Eleonora so only she could hear. "You should have married me, my dear. Now you will rot in a cell until you beg me to take you back." Eleonora looked him in the eye. "I would rather rot." As they dragged her out into the rainy night, Eleonora looked back. She saw Jacob being physically restrained by his own guards to stop him from attacking the police. She saw Beatrix's face, pale with fury, and she saw Sophia, smiling like the cat who had finally eaten the canary. Eleonora was alone again. But this time she wasn't running. She was going to war. November 3rd, 1889, the Derbyshire County Jail. The cell was a stone box, damp and smelling of mildew. For 2 days, Eleonora Vance had sat on a narrow wooden cot, staring at the small square of grey sky visible through the barred window, high on the wall. She had been stripped of her fine wool dress and given a rough, grey prisoner's smock. Her dignity, however, remained intact. When the heavy iron door creaked open, Eleonora stood up, smoothing the coarse fabric of her skirt. She expected the guard with a bowl of watery gruel. Instead, she saw a hooded figure slip inside, pressing a bag of coins into the guard's hand. The figure turned and lowered the hood. It was Jacob. He looked haggard. His eyes were rimmed with red, his jaw unshaven. He looked less like a prince and more like a desperate man. "Eleonora," he breathed, rushing to the bars. He reached through, gripping her hands. His skin was fever-hot. "I have tried everything. The magistrate is in Thorne's pocket. The judge is a cousin of Thorne's business partner. They have set the bail at £10,000. An impossible sum." "I know," Eleonora said softly, her thumbs brushing his knuckles. "Thorne wants to make an example of me. He wants to show the world what happens when you say no to him." "I will not let this happen," Jacob swore, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "I am going to abdicate. If I renounce my claim to the Livonian throne, I can access my private trust immediately. I can pay the bail, I can pay the debt, and we can leave. We can go to America." Eleonora pulled her hands back as if burned. "No. Eleonora, listen to me." "No, Jacob." She stepped back into the shadows of the cell. "You are a crown prince. Your people need you. If you give up your birthright for a scandal, you let Sophia win. You let Thorne win. You prove them right, that I am just a temptress who ruined a king." "I do not care about the crown," Jacob hissed, gripping the bars. "I care about you." "Then fight for me properly," Eleonora said, her eyes blazing. "Don't run away, don't hide. Defeat them. You are a leader, Jacob. Lead." Steps echoed in the corridor. The guard hissed, "Time's up, Governor." Jacob looked at her one last time, agony written on his features. Then a strange resolve hardened his expression. He nodded once. "I will see you in court, Lady Eleonora, and I will bring the thunder." Meanwhile, at Ashford Hall, while Jacob was visiting the prison, Duchess Beatrix was fighting a different war. She sat in the library, surrounded by stacks of ledgers she had ordered her agents to steal from Reginald Thorne's port office in Bristol. "It doesn't make sense," Beatrix muttered to herself, adjusting her spectacles. "Thorne claims to be worth millions. He claims his shipping line, the Obsidian Star, is the most profitable in the Atlantic. But look at these logs. She traced a line on the paper with a manicured fingernail. He is spending 3 times what he is earning, she whispered. He is buying these ships on credit, insuring them for double their value, and then... She paused. Her eyes widened. She pulled a map of the Atlantic Ocean toward her. She cross-referenced the dates of 3 shipwrecks in the last year. The Siren's Call, the Iron Maiden, the Lady Jane, all owned by Thorn. All sank in calm waters, all insured for massive sums. He isn't a tycoon, Beatrix realized, a wicked smile spreading across her face. He is a fraud. He is sinking his own ships to pay his debts. He is broke. She rang the bell on her desk violently. The footman rushed in. "Get me the carriage," Beatrix commanded, grabbing her cane. "And send a telegram to the Admiralty in London. Tell them the Duchess of Ashford has located the survivors of the Lady Jane." "But your Grace," the footman stammered. "The Lady Jane went down with all hands. There were no survivors." Beatrix stood up, pain shooting through her healing leg, but she ignored it. She looked like a warrior queen. "Thorn says there were no survivors," she corrected. "But dead men tell no tales. I intend to find a man who is very much alive." November 5th, 1889. The Derbyshire Assizes Court. The courtroom was packed to the rafters. Reporters from as far away as New York had arrived to cover the trial of the runaway thief. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and anticipation. In the prisoner's dock, Eleonora sat with her head held high. She refused to look at the gallery where the public jeered. Opposite her, Reginald Thorn sat with his legal team. He looked smug, dressed in a black silk suit, twirling his moustache. Beside him sat Princess Sophia, looking bored and elegant, as if she were watching a play rather than a trial. The prosecutor, a man with a voice like grinding stones, stood up. "Gentlemen of the jury," he began, pointing a finger at Eleonora. "The facts are simple. This woman, in a fit of hysteria, fled her sacred vows. In doing so, she absconded with a diamond necklace, the property of Lord Thorn. She was apprehended days later, and the necklace was found in her possession. This is not romance. This is theft. We ask for the maximum sentence, 10 years of hard labor." A murmur of assent went through the crowd. "Call the witness," the prosecutor boomed. "Lord Reginald Thorn." Reginald took the stand. He played the victim perfectly. He wiped a fake tear from his eye. "I loved her," Reginald lied. "I gave her everything, and she spat in my face. The necklace was a family heirloom. She stole it to sell, I am sure of it." "Liar!" Eleonora cried out from the dock before the bailiff silenced her. "The prosecution rests," the lawyer said with a smirk. The judge turned to the defense. Eleonora had been appointed a public defender, a nervous young man who looked terrified of Thorn. "Does the defense have any witnesses?" the judge asked, looking at his watch. He clearly wanted to be done by lunch. "I," the young lawyer stammered. "The defense calls His Royal Highness, Prince Jacob of Livonia." The doors at the back of the courtroom slammed open. Jacob strode in, but he was not dressed in a suit. He was dressed in his full military dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest, a saber at his hip. He looked every inch a king, and he was not alone. Behind him walked Duchess Beatrix, leaning on her cane, and a ragged, one-eyed sailor who smelled of rum and salt. "Objection!" Thorn's lawyer shouted. "This is highly irregular." "This is justice!" Jacob roared, his voice filling the hall. He walked to the center of the room. "I'm not here to testify about the necklace. I am here to testify about the man who claims to own it." He turned to the judge. "My lord, I present to you evidence that the man known as Reginald Thorn is bankrupt." Gasps erupted. Reginald stood up, his face purple. "This is slander." "Is it?" Jacob signalled to Beatrix. She stepped forward and slammed a heavy ledger onto the judge's bench. "These are the true accounts of the Thorn Shipping Company," Beatrix announced, her voice ringing clear. "They show that Lord Thorn has been insolvent for 5 years. He has been surviving by insuring empty ships and scuttling them at sea." She pointed her cane at the ragged sailor. "And this is Quartermaster Higgins. He was on the Lady Jane. He will testify that Lord Thorn personally ordered the Seacocks opened to sink the ship, killing 12 innocent men. Thorn didn't want the necklace back because of sentiment, Your Honor. He wanted it back because it is the last asset he has left in the world. He needs to pawn it to pay his blackmailers." The courtroom erupted into chaos. The judge banged his gavel, but no one listened. Reginald Thorn's face drained of colour. He looked for an exit, but the doors were blocked by royal guards. "And there is one more thing," Jacob said, cutting through the noise. He turned to Princess Sophia. Sophia looked nervous for the first time. She stood up to leave. "I have seen enough of this farce." "Sit down, Sophia," Jacob commanded. The authority in his voice made her freeze. "I have in my hand," Jacob held up a telegram, "a correspondence between Princess Sophia of Prussia and Lord Reginald Thorn, dated 3 days ago." He read it aloud. "Ensure the Vance girl is imprisoned. Once Jacob is broken, I will secure the loan you need from the Prussian treasury. The throne will be ours." The silence was deafening. This was no longer a theft trial. It was treason. Jacob looked at Sophia with cold contempt. "You conspired with a criminal to frame an innocent woman and manipulate a crown prince. By the laws of Livonia and by the laws of common decency, our engagement is terminated. Immediately." Sophia looked at the crowd, seeing the hostility. She gathered her skirts and ran, her heels clicking frantically as she fled the courtroom in disgrace. Jacob turned back to the judge. "Lord Thorn is a fraud, a murderer, and a traitor. Now I ask you, who is the real criminal here?" The judge looked at the ledger. He looked at the sailor. He looked at the trembling Reginald Thorn. "Case dismissed against Lady Eleanora Vance," the judge declared, slamming his gavel. "Bailiff, arrest Lord Reginald Thorn for insurance fraud and conspiracy to commit murder." The pandemonium in the courtroom was absolute, but Eleanora saw none of it. She only saw Jacob. He crossed the floor, ignoring the cheering crowd, ignoring the guards dragging a screaming Reginald away. He came to the dock and personally unlocked the gate. "You brought the thunder," Eleanora whispered, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. "I had help," Jacob smiled, gesturing to Beatrix, who was winking at them. He took Eleanora's hands. "Eleanora, I have no fiancé. I have a country that needs a queen who understands justice, and I have a heart that belongs entirely to you." He knelt, right there on the dirty floor of the Derbyshire Assizes. "I have no ring," he said. "Thorn has the diamond, and it is evidence now. But—" He pulled a simple gold band from his pinky finger, his signet ring. "Will you take this? Will you take me? Not for the crown, but for the man?" Eleanora looked at the man who had risked his kingdom for a girl in a muddy ditch. "Yes," she said, 1,000 times. "Yes." The scandal of 1889 became the fairy tale of the century. Reginald Thorn was sentenced to life in prison, where he died penniless 3 years later. Princess Sophia was exiled to a remote convent in Bavaria by the embarrassed Kaiser. Jacob and Eleanora were married on Christmas Day in a small chapel in Livonia. Eleanora didn't wear silk. She wore a dress of white velvet, designed by herself, and instead of a diamond necklace, she wore a simple locket containing a piece of dried heather from the old Roman road. They ruled Livonia for 40 years. Historians call it the Golden Age of Reform. Queen Eleanora used her influence to rewrite the laws on debt, abolishing debtors' prisons and creating the first legal aid system for the poor. They say she never forgot what it was like to be powerless. And every year, on the anniversary of their meeting, the king and queen would disappear from the palace. They would ride out to the countryside, not in a carriage, but on horseback. Just a man, a woman, and the muddy road that led them home. What a journey. From a muddy ditch in Derbyshire to the throne of a kingdom, Eleanora Vance proved that true nobility isn't about bloodlines. It's about character. This story reminds us that sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the first day of your destiny. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most dramatic romances, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. I want to know what you think. If you were Eleanora, would you have forgiven your parents for trying to force the marriage? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.